I think it's incredibly important for all the organisations dealing with domestic violence to unite, because we know what happens when we do that. We succeed. But we know historically what has happened is when organisations remain in their silos and they don't join together, then we don't build capacity. We don't have the energy to create the difference we absolutely need to have. So, for example, before 2003, when I became Minister for Criminal Justice in the Home Office, you had a plethora of non-governmental organisations working as hard as they possibly could to reduce domestic violence. You had government trying to reduce domestic violence, and you had business trying to reduce domestic violence along with individuals. All of us working really hard, but making a marginal difference. What happened is when we created a multi-agency risk assessment approach, which brought all the agencies together to think about what each of us could do, adding value to each other, we totally changed the paradigm. And that's what made the difference. We went from being able to reduce domestic violence by 8-10%, which is of course phenomenally important. Any reduction is fantastic. But we went from that to reducing it to 64%. Now that difference isn't just a percentage difference, it's men, women and children's lives which are saved. So that's the difference, that coming together and merging our power, collaborating in a way that only we can, to make that difference a reality for the victims who desperately need us to do better.
There are a number of organisations here today from around the world, all of whom do amazing work. And you've just spoken about the practical impact of working together, but the very act of coalition, the very principle of coalition, what kind of message does that in itself send to the rest of the world?
I think it says not in our name. It says that we are not impotent, that we are the arbiters of our own good fortune, that our voices count, and that we can make a difference, and we can make it clear about the sort of world we want to live in. Do we want to live in a world where 1 in 3 women will be subjected to domestic violence, when millions of children live with deprivation and destruction? Or do we want to live in a world where peace is the norm, dignity and respect is the rule? And most of us want the latter, not the former. And I think, therefore, it's important for those of us who want that not to be silent. And the fact that we're all raising our voices at the same moment will mean that we'll have a cacophony of sound which other people won't be able to ignore. And it's taking power, real power, into our own hands. I think each of us has as much power as we choose to take. But I do think it's a matter of choice.
What ideas are you beginning to identify as to what can be done practically?
Well, one of the whole points of creating EDV was to share the learning that we had from operating within the United Kingdom and delivering a change programme in terms of how you deal with domestic violence. So that had been quite a difficult journey for us, going from dysfunction to function, discovering what worked and what didn't work, who you needed to bring together and how you needed to implement a change programme so that you could make a real difference to the lives of victims. And we didn't want to just retain that knowledge to ourselves. The whole point of EDV is we can share that learning with every other country in the world. As you know, domestic violence affects 1 in 3 women across the globe, and that it's the greatest cause of morbidity, that's causing injury and suffering to women and girls in the whole world also. So kills more women than malaria or war or road traffic accidents or basically anything else. And in the past, people have thought, how can we deal with this? How can we respond to it in an effective way? Well, if you like, we have got the DNA of domestic violence, and we have tried to put together a response which will be effective in reducing it. So, as you have probably already been told, we've reduced domestic violence here in the United Kingdom by 64%, and we saved £7.5 billion a year. So we know that if we could do this across Europe, it would increase European GDP by 16%. If we could do it across the world, we would be able to meet the Millennium Goals in terms of women and girls also. So it's a real aspiration that we have, and we now know how it could be done. So the whole point of having EDV is to share that methodology with every other country, institution, NGO or individual who is willing to be part of the solution. And I truly believe now, in the past, people would say changing that paradigm can't be done. We don't know how to do it. We do now. And so now it's a question of choice. Do we choose to eradicate domestic violence or do we not? We know that for every £1 we spent in the United Kingdom during the time the Labour government was in, we saved 6. So this can't be about money, it's about saving money. It was costing our country 23 billion in 2004, domestic violence. It now has been reduced, as I said earlier, by more than 7 billion a year. So we know we can save money, we know we can save lives. And I think the real question, therefore, for us is, do we choose to do so? I know that I choose, and I hope that every single person in the room today is choosing too. And if the world chooses, I think we may have peace one day.
In terms of the campaign, specifically in relation to 21st September, do you think people are going to join in?
Absolutely. I think the campaign is fundamental. And what I love about what Peace One Day are doing is that they aren't just talking about war zones. I think it's very important that in the campaign, Jeremy talks about violence generally. And he is talking about violence in our homes, violence in our schools, violence in our playgrounds, violence in the workplace, because we know violence happens in all those different arenas. And if we truly want to have peace one day, then actually you've got to start with every individual, because peace has to be first here in our hearts. And if each of us are the embodiment of peace, then I want to know how we will ever be able to have another war. So we do have to start. And I believe that each person on this earth has an opportunity to be an agent of peace if they choose. And if we each choose to start today, and so the Peace One Day happens to be today, then being peaceful today will make it so much easier to be peaceful tomorrow. Because all of those people who say it cannot be done, it can. We just have to choose it. And I hope everyone will choose. I'm choosing.
How important is it to raise awareness of issues around domestic violence in the context of a more peaceful world?
I think domestic violence is of fundamental importance, basically because it's not talked about. Lots of people still feel very ashamed of the idea that they're a victim. Many victims think it's their fault, that they've brought this on themselves. In many communities, it is seen as something which should be a cause of shame and for the individual to be shunned. It's also very difficult for people to acknowledge that they have made the wrong choice, that they have failed in the choice of their partner. That's how they see it. And it's incredibly difficult to help them to understand that it's not their fault, that it's the perpetrator's fault, and that they are not at fault for having been victimized. So I think it's one of the issues we must talk about. One of the problems that we have is that so many people are silent about this. They're silent as a victim, but they're also silent as a witness. People close their eyes to it because they find it too painful. You might be a neighbour, you might be a friend, you might be someone walking along the road and you see one person attacking another and you don't want to get involved. You walk on the other side and you remain silent. So I think the reason we have to raise awareness is we have to give ordinary people the courage to know none of us can afford to be silent about this. And if one person is a victim, then we all are victims. I think Tandy said that today, and it is so true. So if we remain silent, this will never get better. And if we remain silent, then victims out there won't know that there are other people who are willing to stand with them, other people who are willing to help them. And so I think that there is nothing more important than us talking about this, to try and make violence history and to try and weld people together to make the change that we must make as a society.
Yes, because this is a campaign which is ostensibly about encouraging people to stop doing something.
Absolutely.
And there may therefore be a tendency for people to go, well, I'm not doing that thing which I'm being encouraged to stop, and therefore it's not relevant to me. What can people do practically? What can they actually do to support
Well, I think the first thing to do is to go online and to make a commitment as to what you're going to do to celebrate this and to make sure that Peace One Day is a reality. You can absolutely do that. What I'd really love people to do is next time you ask somebody, how are you? I'd like you to stop, wait, look them in the eye and listen to the answer. Because so often when I've asked victims, why didn't you say anything? They say, nobody asked me. And so that's a very simple thing that each of us can do, and not be silent. When you see something happening, do something about it. Because our passivity gives permission for violence to continue. And I think we need to say, not in my name. And this is not something with which I am willing to put up, and I'm going to be part of the change. The other thing I would say to you is to support the Elimination of Domestic Violence charity. We are on our way. We intend to help every institution who needs us across the world. But of course we need help and support, and we'll need the resources to be able to do that. So I would say, get out there, help us, talk about this, and keep your friends, your family, your colleagues safe. And
a world record for the largest reduction of global violence, is it possible?
Absolutely, absolutely. If we can reduce domestic violence over a relatively short period in our country by 64%, we can do this anywhere. And with the help of every individual who listens to this campaign, who sees this, with your help, we'll make it happen. And we will have peace one day.
And finally, you may not know the answer to this, but what do you think you'll be doing on the 21st of September this year?
I hope I will be celebrating with all the other people around the world about the reduction in domestic violence and the reduction in violence across the world, so we will have peace one day.